Welcome to your history class. Today we'll be moving to the lesson 4, Ancient Civilization. In this chapter we will be studying what do we mean by the word civilization, and we'll be studying about the different civilizations of the countries. They are the Egyptian civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization, Chinese civilization, Greek civilization, Roman civilization, and Harappan civilization. We all know, children, food, water, and air and light are necessary for all of us. Without these basic necessities, we cannot survive, isn't it? We can get water and favorable weather conditions on the banks of the river for leading a life. So, when we studied about the prehistoric people, they settled on the banks of the river, and later civilization prospered, and the river's bank became the cradles of the ancient civilization. When I tell the word civilization, what do we mean by the word civilization? Civilizations is a group of people in a certain time and certain place, usually people in a certain society. Sometimes the group of people have different culture. So that is civilization. So the reasons why the civilization arise, whatever might be the reasons, there are five important reasons where we can see. The advanced cities, center for trade for a large area, provided market for local farmers and merchants and traders. Examples, we are having the Ur and Babylon, Summer, Memphis and Thebes, Egypt, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Indus Valley, and Luoyang and Liangzhou, China. So these are the different civilizations where we are having. The river banks became, as I told, river banks became the cradles of the ancient civilization. So river civilizations are civilizations which is based around the rivers. Some common examples are ancient Egypt, where the Egyptian civilization took place on the river Nile. Then we are having the Mesopotamian civilization, which was in between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Then we are having the ancient China, see where it existed on the where the Elor River was there, and ancient India, that is the Indus Valley civilization, where the river Sindhu originated. So on the banks of the river Sindhu. So these all civilization took place on where there was a river. Now, as a student, when we tell why should we study the civilization, what are the objectives for this civilization? Why should we know about this? So, as a student, I and you, both of us will identify the characteristics of civilization, and will also analyze the artifacts, means the clay pots, the jewelries, all that the utensils they used during the ancient time, and explain how they are the examples for various characteristics of civilization. To identify what were the achievements of these people during the civilization and what was its effect on the modern life. And we also identify the modern day artifacts with that of the examples of the characteristics of civilization. So all these are the objectives as a student, where I will be knowing all this. As a teacher, I will be knowing. As a student, you will be knowing. Both of us are learners, isn't it, children? So both of us will come to know the characteristics of all the civilization. Now let us move on. Where do we find all these civilization? Where they are? We are having them. Mesoamerican civilization, where we will be having the Mayas, the Aztecs, etc., the civilization which takes place in North America. And we are also having the Andrew regions, where we will be having Incas. These two you will be studying in detail in your 8th standard, children. And we are also having the Havango River, river region. Shang dynasty existed here. And here we are having the Mesopotamian region. Here we are having the Nile Nile Valley, that where we find the Egyptian civilization. Here we are having the Indus where river region, where we are having the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilization. We can see that when we go to the timeline, children, we see that the Mesopotamia, this is the timeline from 4000 BCE to 500 CE. Let us see. The Mesopotamian civilization started from 3500 BCE to 530 BCE. You can see here the time, this one. Then the ancient Egypt civilization, it started around 3100 to 48 BCE. Ancient China, it started from 1766 BCE to 220 CE. Ancient Indian civilization, that is the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilization, when we see, it started from 1500, you can see from 1500 to 1150 CE. 150 CE. Ancient Rome, it started from 509 BCE to 476 CE. Ancient Greece, it started around 800 to 146 BCE. So this is the timeline of the ancient civilizations of the world. Now let us move on to the Egyptian civilization. So, ancient Egypt was a civilization of ancient North Africa, concentrated along the lower reaches of the river Nile. This is the Nile River, where you can see. Situated in the place that is now the country Egypt. This ancient Egyptian civilization, they followed the prehistoric Egypt and coalesced around 3100 BC with the political unification of the upper and lower Egypt under the Menes. The history of ancient Egypt occurred as a series of stable kingdoms separated by the periods of relative instability known as the intermediate periods. So, when we move on to the Egyptian civilization, children, this was the first civilization of the ancient world. This took birth on the banks of the river Nile, and it is a major north flowing river, and it is the longest river of the world in Africa, which joins the Mediterranean Sea. You can see this is Mediterranean Sea. If the river Nile, if it had not flown inside the Egypt, then the Egypt could have been a desert. So that is why Nile is called as, Egypt is called as the gift of Nile. Now let us move on to, this is the map of the river Nile, where you can see the civilization, where we can see we had we had many dynasties also which ruled. We are having the Gizia, where we will be studying about the pyramid, the Memphis and the Asuryas. These are the kingdoms, and this is the Valley of Kings. This is the Karnak, Thebes, Luxor, Aswan. All these are the important dynasties which ruled over the ancient civilization, children. Now let us move on to the political history of Egyptian civilization. The Pharaoh means he is the king. He was the absolute monarch of the country, and at least in theory, wielded complete control of the land and its resources. The king was the supreme military commander and head of the government who relieved a bureaucracy of officials to manage his affairs. In charge of the administration, in charge of the administration was his second in command, and the viceroy who acted as the king's representative and coordinated the land surveys, the treasury, buildings, projects, the legal systems, and the archives. At a regional level, the country was divided as many as 42 administrative regions called nomes. Each was governed by a monarch who was accountable to the viceroy for his jurisdictions. The temples formed the backbone of the economy. Not only were they places of worship, but they were also responsible for collecting and storing the kingdom's wealth in a system of granaries and treasuries, administered by overseers who redistributed the grains and the goods. So the kings of Egypt were called as pharaohs. Menes were the first pharaoh. His capital was Memphis. Among all the pharaohs after the Menes, Khufu, Amenhotep, and Thomas were prominent, were important. You can see this. The Pharaoh was the king. He ruled the Egypt as a god. He was the king of Egypt. You can see here. So, and next came the government officials who were the viceroy, the priest, and the nobles. They helped to run the government and the temples. The third group was the soldiers. Their duty was to fight against the foreigners and protect the Egyptian land. Then came the scribes. They could read and write. They spent 12 years to learn how to do it. Then came the merchants. Fifth group. They exchanged the products, that is trade. You can see here in this picture. Then came the craftsmen. They produced goods. Then came the peasants. They were the farmers, construction workers. And the last group were the slaves. They were the prisoners of the war, house servants, and they had to obey. So this was the hierarchy in the political system. So the Egyptian social pyramid. This diagram shows how the Egyptian society was shaped, which groups formed the top two levels and the social pyramid. The bottom two shows the levels of the people, that they were peasants and they were the slaves. Now, when I tell pharaohs, what is a pharaoh? So, pharaohs are the rulers of Egypt and the divine living ruler. They rule everything, the money and even the people. The only expectation is if the pharaoh is poor, a richer man can rule over them. The pharaoh can make anyone do whatever they want. He can make people work for him if he wanted to. So we are also having some of the important major male pharaohs. There were several pharaohs of Egypt. Let us see who were the important pharaohs. As I told, Menes, Tutmosis III, Akhenaten, Ramses II, Khufu, Tutankhamen were all the important major male pharaohs. So these pharaohs, when we take it as single, they were the supreme leaders of the ancient Egypt and were considered to be the gods. They ruled over the entire land and were responsible for everyone in the kingdom. Therefore, there were four important pharaohs which we had to remember: Khufu, Senusret first, Hatshepsut, and Ramses II. We can see next we will move on to the largest pyramid. The largest pyramid of Giza is called as the Pyramid of Khufu, which was built by Khufu. So, The three famous pyramids in Giza. Giza is the most sought after place for viewing the Egyptian pyramids. The three pyramids in Giza rank the top tourist destinations in the world, children. Although the Great Pyramids is the most famous, the other two rank in the popularity. They are the Great Pyramid of Giza, Pyramid of Khafre, and Pyramid of Menkaure. Pyramid of Giza, children, is the Arabic Amarahamat al Gizya. Gizya, also spelled Gizya, Gizeh, 3/4th dynasty. The pyramids, erected on a rocky plateau on the west bank of the Nile River near Al Jizya in northern Egypt. In ancient times, they were indulged among the seven wonders of the world. The ancient ruins of Memphis areas, including the Pyramid of Giza, the Saqqara, the Dashar, Abu Ruwais, and Abu Sir, were collectively designated a UNESCO World Heritage in 1979, children. The designations of the pyramids Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure corresponded to the kings for whom they were built. The northernmost and the oldest pyramid of the group was built for Khufu, that is the Greek Cheops, the second king of the fourth dynasty, called the Great Pyramid. It is the largest of the three. The length, when we see, children, of each side at the base averaging is 755.75 feet, that is 230 meters, and its original height is being 481.4 feet, that is 147 meters, children. The middle pyramid, which was built by Khafre, this one, the fourth of the eight kings of the fourth dynasty, the structure measures about 707.75 feet, that is 216 meters on each side, and was originally 471 feet, that is 143 meters in height. The southernmost and the last pyramid is being built. The southernmost and the last pyramid to be built was that of the Menkaure, the fifth king of the fourth dynasty. Each side measures about 356.5 feet, that is 109 meters, and the structure's completed height was 218 feet, that is 66 meters. All the three pyramids were plundered both internally and externally in ancient and medieval times. Thus, the grave goods originally deposited in the burial chambers are missing, and the pyramids no longer reach their original heights because they have been almost stripped of their outer casings of smooth white limestone. The Great Pyramid, for example, is now sorry, children, is only now 451.4 feet, that is 138 meters in height. That of the Khafre retains the outer limestone casing only at its topmost portion. The constructed near each pyramid was mortuary temple, which was linked via a sloping causeway to the valley temple on the edge of the Nile flood plain. Also nearby the subsidiary pyramids used to be the burials of the other members of the royal family. The Khufu's pyramid is perhaps the most colossal single building ever erected on the planet. Its sides rise at the angle. This angle, children, this is called as an angle where you learn in geometry, is 51 degrees and 52 minutes and are accurately oriented to the fourth cardinal points of the compass. The Great Pyramid's core is made of yellowish limestone blocks. The outer casing now almost completely it is gone now, children, and the inner passage are of finer light colored limestone, and the interior burial chamber is built by huge blocks of granite. Approximately 2.3 million blocks of stones were cut, transported and assembled to create the 5.75 million ton structure, which is the masterpiece of technical skill and engineering ability. The internal walls as well as of those few in outer casing stones that still remain in the place show the finer joints than any other masonry constructed in ancient Egypt. So the entrance, when we move on to the entrance of the Great Pyramid, is on the north side about 59 feet, that is 18 meters above the ground level. A sloping corridor. We are also having a sloping corridor which descends from it through the pyramid's interior masonry, penetrates the rocky soil on which the structure rests, and the ends is an unfinished underground chamber. From the descending corridor branches an ascending passageway that leads to a room which is also known as a queen's chamber, and to a great slanting gallery that is 151 meters long. So this is about the pyramids. The question of how the pyramids were built has not received a wholly satisfactory answer, children. The most plausible one is that the Egyptians employed a sloping and encircling embankment of brick, earth and sand, which was increased in height and in length as the pyramid rose. Stone blocks were hauled up the ramp and means of sledges, rollers and levelers. According to the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, the Great Pyramid took 20 years to construct and demanded the labor of 100,000 men. This figure is believable given the assumption that these men who were agricultural laborers worked on the pyramids only while there was a little work done in the fields. That is, when the Nile River was in flood. By the late 20th century, archaeologists found the evidence that a more limited workforce may have occupied the site on a permanent rather than the seasonal basis. It was suggested that as a few of 20,000 workers with accompanying support personnel, that is the bakers, physicians, priests, would have been adequate for the task. So this is about the what do we tell children about the pyramid. We are also having a great king called as Amenhotep, who expanded his kingdom and established an empire by his conquest. We are having that Thutmose I was the greatest conqueror among all the later pharaohs. His daughter Hatshepsut came to power after him and came to be known as the first emperors of the world. Finally, about 2300 years ago, Alexander the Great, he conquered the Egypt. He appointed his military general Ptolemy Ptolemy as his representative. Later, Ptolemy declared himself as the king of Egypt and established the Ptolemaic dynasty. The popular queen Cleopatra was the last ruler of this dynasty. Eventually, Egypt became a province of Rome. So, now we will move on to see, this is the flow chart about the Egyptian civilization, what we are having, about the kings who ruled over the Egyptian civilization, children. We are having the Ahimos, we are having the Ptolemy's third, fourth, Queen Kia, who ruled over this kingdom. Now let us move on to the contributions of the Egyptian civilization. As we see from this slide, children, we see the uses of mathematics they had. Influence on time was it started, works cited, then mathematical textbook also was created during this time. Now let us move on to the contributions of the Egyptian civilization. They invented glass, linen, paper and ink, the calendar, the clock, geometry and the alphabets, the refinement of dress and ornaments, furniture and dwellings, society and life was started. So, the main food crops the people of Egypt they used was wheat and barley. The water of Nile was used for agriculture and also through canals, and the conditions of slaves was very bad. The large pyramids were possible because of these slaves. Women were given important status in the society, and the people of Egypt believed life after the death, and they preserved the dead bodies, and that the preservation of these dead bodies was called as mummies. In ancient Egypt, each city had its own guardian goddesses. Sun and river were considered and worshipped as gods. The Egyptian civilized script is known as hieroglyphics, and which means sacred writing. They used the ink to write on paper, grass growing papyrus, grass growing in river Nile. They had a lot of knowledge of geometry which was used in the building of large pyramids. The large statue of Sphinx is the most attractive of Egyptian architecture. The Sphinx is an animal with the body of a lion and the head of a man. You can see here, see children, the lasting contribution. So advanced cities had power over the surrounding land. Specialized workers, rulers, officials, priests and wealthy landlords led the society. Complex institutions. Pharaohs ordered the people to build elaborate tombs. Priests ran large temples. Record keeping and writing, hieroglyphic sorry children, hieroglyphic writings had the symbols that stood for ideas and for sound. Then the advanced technology was the advances were made in engineering, astronomy and medicine. So the lasting contribution was mummification, that is the preservation of the dead bodies. The emblems was removed, the vital organs they dried. How did they do that? The mummification. The dead bodies, how did they preserve? See, they removed the vital organs, they dried and wrapped the body in strips of linen. The process took months to complete. Pharaohs were buried in the valleys of the kings. King Tut was found by British archaeologist Howard Carter. The tomb provided the treasures and evidence about the Egyptian civilization. So this is one activity where I have given to you, activity 1. So what you had to do is you had to write the lesson name. You will write as Egyptian civilization, and you will write it as activity 1. where Egypt is located and the characteristics of the people that they lived. So you had to copy this geography where it is located, and the map you had to draw only so much, and here you will write about the what were the contributions of the Egyptian civilization and their culture and hieroglyphics. What do you mean by hieroglyphics and what it is there? So in the next class, children, we will move on to the Mesopotamian civilization. Thank you, children.